Arts Alive is funded in part by the Sacramento Cultural Arts Program of the Sacramento Metropolitan Arts Commission, with support from the City and County of Sacramento.
Art does have public value.
I visited the art museum in the 4th grade and it changed my life.
I think we've changed a lot of lives here in the past 120 years.
Great cities are defined by their museums.
Art can't stay the same. Artists don't stay the same.
I believe that the new museum will be kind of a symbol of a new Sacramento.
A house of art contains expressions of many kinds, and not just paintings or sculptures or new innovations. There's also the examination of universal experience that speaks to who we are, where we're going, where we've been. Sacramento's preeminent house of art sits on the property of what was once the home of Edwin and Margaret Crocker. What we know today as the Crocker Art Museum began more than 120 years ago. It was one family's philanthropic gift to any and everyone who passes through these doors.
When they arrived in Sacramento, it was August 1852. They had come from Indiana by way of New York, the long trip through the Isthmus to California, which took well over a month for them. They encountered disease. In fact, Margaret nearly died of typhoid fever in her first month here. You come to November of 1852, was one of the most notorious conflagrations, big fires here. They lost nearly everything they had. Fortunately for Edwin, one of his most precious possessions was his library of law books. That survived. He's also, of course, becoming involved with some of the other people who were here in the community, which coincidentally involved such names as the grocer, Leland Stanford, and his brothers. Charles Crocker, of course, is a prominent merchant here. Collis Huntington is here. Mark Hopkins is here. So when Leland Stanford becomes governor in 1862, he looks around, he has an opportunity to fill a vacancy that has come up on the state Supreme Court, and he turns to Edwin Crocker. Actually, Edwin only served on the court for 7 months. He was called Judge Crocker for the rest of his life.
Our government is our servant, not our master.
Edwin Crocker was one of the founders of the Republican Party here in Sacramento. That was considered the radical party of the time, and they were devoted to 3 things. One was preserving the Union. They were also very interested in the cause of anti-slavery, abolition. And the third thing was they were very much devoted to getting a railroad track across the country, a transcontinental railroad. Among the early investors in the railroad were, of course, the big 4 that we know of, a few other investors in town. Edwin was one of the minor investors. He certainly was involved. But it's not until really he steps down from his position on the state Supreme Court that he begins to become involved in a full way with the Central Pacific Railroad. And at that time, he becomes actually the head of the legal department. However, if I can also interweave one other thing here, I think we see the beginning of his interest in art.
Many historians believe that Edwin's hiring of Alfred A. Hart, the official photographer of the Central Pacific Railroad, helped launch his growing love of the visual arts. In a letter to Collis Huntington, Judge Crocker wrote of Hart's riveting stereographs, "As a work of art, they cannot be surpassed."
In June 1869, Edwin is completing another arduous day of business in San Francisco. He returns to the Lick Hotel where he stayed when he was there. And at some point in that evening, he collapses. He has collapsed from a stroke. So all of this work had really taken its toll, 5 years of arduous work. in August of 1869, really almost 6 weeks after this event, he has recovered sufficiently to fulfill what I think had been a goal even earlier, and that was to take advantage of this new transcontinental railroad. So with his wife and their 4 daughters, they launch on a trip across the country, across the Atlantic Ocean to Europe. This is their grand tour, the purpose of which is to give his family an exposure to culture, to learning, and to begin to build another part of his remarkable art collection.
Before he left, he commissioned an architect, Seth Babson, to build a gallery for his return, and he was going to bring paintings back to fill it. He was gone for 3 years. During that time, depending on which source you believe, he purchased 700 to 900 master paintings, European paintings, both contemporary German works and old masters, and up to 3,000 master drawings.
That collection is a gem that to this day draws scholars from across the world. So it was an amazing gift to give to this community.
When they got back, they started to acquire the work of California artists, and at the time they were all contemporary artists. And so those things are still what we collect today, and we've expanded upon those areas, but those were the original core.
Perhaps the most famous California painting commissioned by E.V. Crocker is Sunday Morning in the Mines by Charles Christian Nall. Nall came west in search of gold before opening a studio in Sacramento in the early 1850s. The Crocker Art Museum owns several of his vivid paintings. But by far the best-known Nall image is this one, the grizzly bear that adorns the California state flag.
A lot of people think that the gallery wing, because of its great Victorian architecture, was the Crocker family home. But in fact it was not. It was built as a museum. The Crocker family home was on the corner of 3rd and O Street, what we now refer to as the mansion wing.
This building was built really as a family entertainment center, and also for the benefit of a community. And so they very much designed this, very forward thinking, with the public in mind. This was to be a place where people could come together in Sacramento. And they, even before they gave it to the city in 1885, they opened it up so that people could come and enjoy the treasures that they'd acquired, which was a pretty gutsy move, I think, for the time period.
In their day, Edwin and Margaret made that museum available at times of day that we would consider very odd, between 1 and 5 p.m. in the afternoon and 8 to 10:30 at night, so that working people could come. It was not just for tea parties and banquets and balls and other kinds of presentations. It was truly for the people of Sacramento.
Margaret Crocker, after Judge Crocker died in 1875, and Margaret was his widow, she carried on with Judge Crocker's desires to have the gallery open to the public on a certain basis and to share the works of art with others.
It was in 1885 that Margaret decided, and there were wonderful and interesting reasons leading up to this, to present the Crocker Art Gallery building, its contents, and the grounds surrounding it to the people of Sacramento.
Margaret Crocker told David Lubin that if he could raise $300,000, that she would give the gallery and the collection to that association, that nonprofit. Unfortunately, they failed in the raising of the $300,000, but Margaret Crocker, still wanting to fulfill the judge's desires, said, okay, what we'll do instead is create co-trustees. We'll have the Museum Association be a trustee with the city of Sacramento.
So not only did she fulfill this one part of their shared dream, which was giving the largest privately held collection of art in the country at the time to the public, she also established a way that it would always be in trust for the public.
Edwin and Margaret had 4 children, but it was their youngest daughter, Amy, who gained worldwide notoriety for her colorful reputation and ardent independence. Well, that and the lavish parties, the purple hair, the tattoos, the pet boa, or the 5 husbands, 2 of whom were said to be princes. Amy's celebrity has transcended time, as evidenced by her MySpace page. A Laurel Thatcher Ulrich quote there says it all. Well-behaved women rarely make history.
By 1911, one of the Crocker daughters reacquired what had been their family home and gave it to the museum. And the museum expanded then into the mansion wing. The real second addition to the museum after the mansion wing was called the Herald Wing. R.A. Herald had been an architect in Sacramento. He was very interested in contemporary art, and through his estate, he left money to build basically an art museum.
But if we try a little patience and willingness to learn, we may find strange and exciting adventures.
It was determined that the funds from that estate should be used to expand the Crocker, and in 1969 a cast concrete addition was put on the back of the building.
The arts became very literary.
The old mansion wing was in a state of decay. When I finally got to go way up to the attic and see that there were little pans all over collecting water, there was such a drippy ceiling. You have to know that there was no air conditioning in that whole building with all this fabulous collection of art. There was a time when we looked at tearing that building down because there was nothing of tremendous, I guess, historic importance left. The historians said, no, we're not going to take that. You can't tear that building down.
The first thing that these children come to realize is that the building itself is an architectural treasure.
The deal was to recreate the exterior so you could see where the Crockers lived and make it as historic and beautiful as you can, including the old fences. We even found the old fence work. All around the community, people started bringing in things that belonged there. If you notice, there's a glass room that connects the old and the new. And at the time, the architect said, that's the best connector when you have something old and something new, is to use the use of glass.
So the expansion that was done in 1989 was a great expansion, but it just still did not add a loading dock, an auditorium, a cafe, many of the things that were identified in the 70s as being needed.
When Margaret gave the E.B. Crocker Art Gallery to Sacramento in 1885, the city showed its appreciation with a grand celebration called Festival of Flowers. 100 years later, in 1985, Sacramento threw yet another party in Margaret's honor, commemorating her gift to generations of area residents.
The Crocker Art Museum not only is historically very important and a tremendous treasure with its collection, but it's a gateway. I mean, it's an absolute portal for anyone who walks through its doors to kind of be transformed and to understand who we have been and frankly where we're going.
I came here because I believe in mid-sized art museums, the power they have on communities, the ability they have to engage audiences. I believe that museums are integral to the fabric of a community, and I wanted to make this institution matter. So one of the things we started doing immediately was looking at our exhibition schedule in a 3-year block. And within that 3-year block, we tried to make sure that we had a variety of media, of cultures, of one-person shows, of thematic exhibitions. Tried to make sure that there was basically something for everyone.
So much something, in fact, that the Crocker stores the 96% of their collection not on display in 5 different locations closed to the public.
It was owned by Amy Crocker. It's a really heavy garment. I mean, this was a commitment to wear.
These storage facilities also house works waiting to be restored.
I think the Crocker is an incredibly important resource for this community, and I think that everyone that I've met that lives here loves this museum.
I think what the Crocker is great at is the connection to original art. And the museum itself is a great place to get people in to see things they may have never seen before. The Art Arc is a great place to get school children to see things they may have never seen before.
Very good, right? Are you talking about the huge painting? Good, I remember that.
The first question I always ask a student is, what do you see? And the conversation builds from there. And every response is always different.
I think it's the Chinese wall back there.
Okay, maybe like the Chinese wall. Maybe like the Great Wall, maybe?
Yeah.
And so then we foster those elements of art, line, shape, pattern, color, and those elements are going to be something that the student's going to take with them into the classroom. They might see the tile mural in their classroom wall a little differently because now they know what pattern is, you know? Or they might see a dog, where they've seen a dog in one of the paintings in the Art Arc right now, and they might look at a dog in a different way.
Looks like my cat.
I think it's so interdisciplinary, and I don't think people realize that. People think art is an elitist thing. People think that art's not approachable, that it's very separate from other fields. But art is so in tune with everything else. It's the science behind a material. It's learning symmetry and balance and math, mathematical skills. Also, especially with this Art Arc right now, it's about literacy, it's about visual literacy, it's about looking and seeing and critical thinking, making connections. The Art Arc's not going to go anywhere, it's going to keep going and moving out to these areas and to these underserved areas and bring that resource to them, and hopefully with the expansion it'll get more attention so we can get more exposure for programs like the Art Arc.
Donor funding and private donations account for most of the Crocker's highly regarded collection. In fact, these 3 pieces of jewelry were the gift of a family from Georgia. So why the Crocker Art Museum? Turns out the donor is the great-great-granddaughter of Margaret and E.B. And if you look closely, you'll see that this piece is already on display at the museum. Margaret is wearing it in her portrait, located near the California Room.
When the kids grew up and left the house, my mom was a kind of an empty nester. And since her kids were her whole life, she was looking for something else to do, and she decided she would save cups if they had roses on it. She loved cups with roses because roses were pretty.
Well, one day she came home and said, I found a cup and saucer I really love. And I said, well, if you like it, buy it. She says, it's expensive. I said, how much? She says, $250. I said, for a cup and saucer? And so then we went out looking for anything with the Meissen mark, which is basically was what we call the cross swords.
My mom was a clerical worker. She earned $500 a month. My parents lived in a $60,000 mobile home, and they had a $600,000 Meissen collection. You pick up a piece of Meissen and you look at it, and it's a delicate, fragile, beautiful work of art. But like my mom, who was delicate and fragile, it has great character. It has depth. It has history.
The first collection went on exhibition at the De Young Museum in 1984. As the collection closed, because she had accomplished her goal, she decided to sell. I made a mistake in Florida. I found a Watteau teapot. And I says, would you like it? Of course I want it. She said, I want it all.
My dad called all 3 of us and said, you know, what do you want to do? I'm thinking about putting it in the Crocker. It's your inheritance, kids. And all of us said, of course, absolutely, yes, do it.
Kathy was so dedicated. She wouldn't buy new clothes. It was porcelain. I mean, it proves one thing, that if you really want something, or you want to do something, you can do it.
Founded in 1892, the Kingsley Art Club's mission was to develop artistic appreciation throughout the Sacramento region. By 1927, the club found a permanent home at the E.B. Crocker Art Gallery. Thus was born the Crocker Kingsley Exhibition, where new artists could show their work in a prestigious museum setting. A few local artists who've been recognized include Gregory Condos, Wayne Thiebaud, and Stephen Kaltenbach.
I believe that sometimes the best works don't present a final answer, that the people who are looking at the work actually have a part in building the perception within their own mind. Sure, for me, it's a way of honoring my dad. He was a really nice person, and I had a kind of a vision of what it could be. And in as much as it coincided with his leaving the world, then it also was an important milestone for me to understand him more and understand what he had done for me. One of the things that happened was that I made some serious mistakes that turned out to be just the right thing. I had only done about 10 hairs, and he was standing at the back of the room, and he could see better than I could. He had a better viewpoint. And he said, "Them things look like broom handles sticking out of his chin." And so I thought, uh-oh, and I went down, walked back, and sure enough, they were really big. And I actually never painted over them. You can actually see them down at the bottom of the stack of beard on my dad's chin in the painting. When it was first shown at the Crocker in 1979, the work was displayed in the corner of one of the bigger rooms in back. So when you got off the elevator, there was about 100 feet between you and the painting, which is better. The distance that is available now isn't quite long enough. And so I'm looking forward to the new wing when it'll be in a bigger room.
That bigger room will be in a brand new Crocker Art Museum, now under construction on O Street. The new museum will be linked to the old, effectively tripling the size. Completion date for this masterpiece in the making is in mid-2010.
We're only expanding this museum so that we can better fulfill our mission. We were woefully inadequate as far as physical space in every area of operation. Less than 4% of our collection could be viewed at any particular time.
And so we began the long, slow task of bringing the museum into what we know today will be a state-of-the-art facility that Sacramento will forever take great pride in, because it will be measured and be comparable with any museum in the United States.
We went through a very elaborate RFP, and that RFP led to 32 responses from world-renowned architects in the field of designing museums. And we narrowed the field down to 3 and selected the firm of Gwathmey and Siegel, who were known for their remodel of the Guggenheim Museum in Manhattan, for the development of the Fogg Museum at Harvard.
There have been people that have said, why aren't you building a Victorian structure next to the Crocker? And probably the simplest answer is, Judge Crocker built a piece of high-style contemporary architecture, because he realized museums, if anybody, art museums, if anybody should look to design, look to contemporary society and create a great piece of architecture for a community.
Today, museums are telling a story. They're pointing forward, not backward. They're saying, here's where architecture is today. Come in. The water's fine. Come on in. Come on, see what we're doing here. It's different. And I think that portends something great for the future.
Anytime you can say world-class in the city of Sacramento, I think it's a great conversation. And the Crocker Art Museum, when it's done, with its kind of renovation, it will be a world-class museum.
This building, both the old and the new, and particularly the new, is going to become a defining icon of Sacramento. I think it's a symbol of what Sacramento aspires to be and what it is becoming.
It's about business, good business, and good business is what will make this city be a great city.
Great art museums are important to all communities. We're really excited about it being a part of not only the business growth in the city of Sacramento, but also the personal growth that each one of us has in this community to learn how to live our lives in better ways.
I've been fortunate enough to have my life changed by museums. More importantly, I think, and definitely more satisfying, is the fact that throughout my career I've had the opportunity to really see how art and how museum experiences have changed other people's lives. And I think that if you have ever had that kind of experience, you know how desperately art matters.
To order a DVD copy of this program, call 888-814-3923 or visit kvie.org/viewfinder.
Arts Alive is funded in part by the Sacramento Cultural Arts Program of the Sacramento Metropolitan Arts Commission with support from the City and County of Sacramento.